Okay, good morning. We are on Nun Gimel Amud Aleph. We said yesterday that there is a machlokes. Rabbi Yoshia and Rabbi Yonasan both agree that a stam misa in the Torah is chanek. Rabbi Yoshia says that the order is skrila, sreifa, herek, chanek, and therefore you pick the lowest one. And Rabbi Yonasan says, no, the lowest is not chanek. But Lamaisa, at the end of the day, I have a Kabbalah that even though it's seemingly, according to him, sreifa, skila, chenek, hereg, and chenek is second to last. Nevertheless, even though hereg is the lowest, I have a Kabbalah that any misa, again, this is talking about misa's beit-dins when it says that you have to die, and it doesn't specify what kind of misa. He has a Kabbalah that even though chenek is not the lowest, chenek will be the choice or death of choice when there is no misa specified. And then Rebbe came along and said that it has to do with the fact that chenek doesn't leave a roshem. And it mentioned that sreifa doesn't necessarily even leave a roshem either. But at the end of the day, since sreifa is specific to, it says that you burn the nara hamiras, or you burn, the bas kohen. Therefore, we assume that other cases are not sreifa and actually are chanek. So bishlam al Rabbi Yonasan kidikam efarish Rabbi Taima. El Rabbi Yoshia mimai deika chanek baolam. Aim asayif. Very fascinating. So the Gemara is suggesting at this point that if you say that you need a type of misa that doesn't have a roshem different than sreifa, so then I understand why you need something called chanek in the world, because it's something that doesn't leave a mark, and it's different than sreifa. But at the end of the day, it's interesting to note that in the Torah, all you'll see is skila, sreifa, and herek. Lefi charev, skila, you have to give skila, you have to visaraf. It says nowhere in the Torah, v'chanak, that you should do chanaka, that you should do strangulation. So the Gemara's question is, at this point, if you don't need, as Rebbe's explaining, if you don't need a misa within Rabbi Yonasan, if you don't need a misa that doesn't leave a roshem, that's not sreifa, so who says that there's anything called chenek in the first place? Maybe it's just skila, sreifa, hereg. Says the Gemara, amarava arba misos gemara gmira lahu. No, there's seemingly a gemara gmira lahu. Halach l'moshe misinai. We have a halach l'moshe misinai that we're learning, that seemingly both would learn at this point, that you know that it's skila, sreifa, hereg, v'chenek. So then what does Rabbi Yonasan mean when he says lo mipnei shehikala? What is that talking about? He says, my lo mipnei shehikala, kamiflege b'plukta to Rabbi Shimon v'Rabbanan. So the way it comes down in the Gemara sounds like that everybody agrees that there's a Gemara Gemira lahu. There's halacha l'mash misinai, that there's skila, sreifa, hereg, v'chenek. Again, 3 of them are in the Torah, and the 4th one is chenek. The plukta that they have is what's the order. And it seems like the plukta is based on what's that halacha l'mash misinai. What's the order? Is it, and again, just to make sure we remember, it's not that you just mix all 4 of them up. It's the first 2, or the inverse of the first 2, the last 2, or the inverse of the last 2. Skila, sreifa, hereg, v'chenek, is that the order? Or do you switch the first 2 and switch the last 2, where it's sreifa, skila, chenek, v'hereg? That's the machlokes. And then he says, well, if you hold that, like Rabbi Yoshi is holding it skila, sreifa, hereg, v'chenek, therefore when there's nothing in the Torah specifying which one you get chenek, because it's the least of them. Rabbi Yonasan says, no, I hold it sreifa, skila, chenek, hereg. I said, then why did the pashut, why when it just says that you died, you give them chenek? Because that's a gemira gmirlu. That's also Kabbalah that I have. I have one Kabbalah that it's sreifa, skila, chenek, hereg, and the other Kabbalah is that when it's not specified, you give the person chenek and not hereg. Amalei Rav Zera li Abaye. Sha'ar haniskalim de lo ksiv behu skila, that means we know, as we'll see on the next daf, there's a list of people who get skila. It's on the bottom of this daf. But it's interesting to note that not every single person that's listed as getting skila does it say in the pasuk that you uskaltem ba'avanim v'mesu, that you kill them with skila. So the people that it doesn't say that get skila in the Torah, and we know that the punishment is skila, where do we learn the punishment from skila from? There must be some type of gzeira shava. So Gemara says that it tells us that there's skila by ovi yidoni. What's that? Those are people who speak to the dead. Over there, it says that there's skila. Based on the words over there, we can learn that similar words elsewhere that have the same words, when it says those words, it's going to mean skila as well. What are those words? Well, it says a few things by ovi yidoni. It says the words mos yumsu or mos yumas, and it says the word demei hembam. So the Gemara's question is, b'mai gmire, b'mos yumsu gmire, or b'demei hembam gmire? Do you learn to any time it says mos yumsu or mos yumas and it doesn't specify the penalty, so you learn from ovi yidoni from those words that you get skila? Or do you learn from the words Demei Ambam that you get skila? Now, what's the difference? Who cares? The difference is that there are certain places where it says Mos Yumsu, but it doesn't say Demei Ambam. And maybe there are certain places where it says Demei Ambam and it doesn't say Mos Yumsu. Seemingly not the case. As you've seen in the Gemara, there are places where it says Mos Yumsu and doesn't say Demei Ambam. So if you're learning the Gzerat Shava from Oven Yidoni from Mos Yumsu, from Mos Yumas, and you're going to make Gzerat Shava that anywhere it says Mos Yumas, you're going to learn like Oven Yidoni, then you're going to say anywhere it says Mos Yumas, you're going to say that it's Skila. But if you learn from Demei Ambam, then you're not going to say Skila by any time it says Mos Yumas. You're only going to say Skila in the cases where it says Demei Ambam. And when it only says Mos Yumas, you wouldn't necessarily say Skila. What would you say? You would say the default, whatever that is. What is the default? Well, everybody agrees the default is Chanek. Zak the Gemara. Amar lei b'demehem demehem bam gemirei. It must be demehem demehem bam. Why? De'i b'mos yumsu gemirei demehem demehem lamali. It must be demehem bam that we learn from, because if not, then mos yumsu. If you learn from mos yumsu, what are you going to do with demehem demehem or demehem bam? Elamai b'demehem demehem gemirei mos yumsu lamali. The Gemara says, well, okay, very nice, shkoyach, but if I use demehem bam, what am I learning mos yumsu for? Says Gemara Kidatanya. What does the word mos yumas mean? Again, assuming that we can learn something else from Mos Yumas, then we have Demei Ambam left, and that's what we're going to use for the Gzerat Shava. Kedetanya, Mos Yumas Hamak Erotzeachi. If you kill somebody, then you have to die. Ein li ela b'misa ksuvavo. I only know that he gets a ksuva that's there. What's a ksuva that's there? That we're going to give him a cherev. He's going to get hereg. Ein li ela b'misa ksuvavo. Minayin sheimata yachol misa b'misa ksuvavo. Shatam misa b'chol misa shata yachol miso. Let's say a guy is supposed to get an arba misas beit-din, or in this case, he's supposed to get hereg, and he starts running away from beit-din. How do you know you could take out the shotgun and shoot him while he's swimming across a canal? Talmud lomar mos yumas hamaka mikol makom. You go ahead and you kill the guy mikol makom. So the words mos yumas in certain places teaches us that you can kill that person regardless. It means even though they chayav a certain thing, even though they chayav a certain misas beit-din, if you can't do it for whatever reason practically, then you do something else. So now again, when it says by Oven Yidoni, Mos Yumas, and it says Demei Ambam, now I know what the Mos Yumas means. Mos Yumas is telling me that if you can't kill them the way that you're supposed to kill them, i.e. Skila, then you kill them a different way. What do we do with the word Demei Ambam? Demei Ambam is used as a Gzerat Shava than anywhere else in the Torah that it says Demei Ambam, and it doesn't specify what type of penalty they get. They're going to get the same penalty as Oven Yidoni, i.e. they're going to get Skila. Says the Gemara, Amalei Ravachami Difti L'Ravina. It sounds like what the Gemara here is saying is that the Gemara is assuming that Abaye, who answered the question, he was looking for any possible way to learn the words Mos Yumsu. Because for some reason he had a hesitation to say that the basis of the Gzerat Shava to learn across the board from Oven Yidoni to other cases that it's going to be Skila, he had a hesitation to use the words Mos Yumsu, and he was much happier to use the words Demei Ambam. Why? Because as I mentioned before, as the Gemara is about to say, there are two examples of cases where it says the word Mos Yumas, and yet we know Mefurash, we know from Halacha that the people do not get Skila. They get Chenek. And therefore, Lamaisa, if you have a case where you have two cases that you know of where the person we know in Halacha gets Chenek, and yet you're going to tell me that the Gzerat Shava teaches me that Mos Yumas means you get Skila, then you're going to end up with problems. So it's a lot better to say that Demei Ambam is the Gzerat Shava for Skila, and if you have Mos Yumas, it teaches me something else. And therefore, those two cases which don't have Demei Ambam, it's okay to say that they have Mos Yumas and it's Chenek, because again, we don't learn Skila from Mos Yumas. What are the two cases where we would have a problem if it was just a matter of learning from Mos Yumas? Eishes Ish and Make Aviv V'imo. Lima Eishes Ish Kakashile Lemeise V'ligmar Mos Yumas Meo V'yidoni Malahalam B'skila Afkan B'skila Mida Amar Rachmana Arusa B'skila Miklal Dinisua Lav B'skila. So originally, what was he bothered by? He was bothered with the fact that, again, we know that she gets Chenek. And therefore, how can you learn Mos Yumas to say Skila across the board? Because then you would basically have Eishes Ish, who on one hand, from a Gzerat Shava of Mos Yumas, should be getting Skila. On the other hand, we know she gets Chenek. Says Gemara, that wouldn't have been a problem. Why? Mida Amar Rachmana Arusa B'skila, because the Torah specifically tells us that an Eishes Ish who's an Arusa, who was engaged and is an Eishes Ish, she gets Skila. What does that imply? Miklal Dinisua Lav B'skila. That implies that only a Eishes Ish who's an Arusa gets Skila. And that would imply that an Asua would not get Skila. And therefore, even if you had Mos Yumas, by the case of Eishes Ish, you would not have learned. Even if you would have a Gzeirat Shava of Mos Yumas in general, you would not have had a problem, and you would not have learned Mos Yumas to the case of a Nesua as an Eishes Ish, because you would know from another pasuk to exclude it. Again, this is just the reason that he was bothered and the reason he shouldn't have been bothered. At the end of the day, he's still going to make the Gzeirat Shava from Demei Hambam. But the Gemara was just going in his mind why he pushed so hard to go ahead and make the Gzeirat Shava from Demei Hambam. And the Gemara is answering, he didn't have to push that hard. At the end of the day, he did, but it's just explaining that he could have made the Gzeirat Shava from Mos Yumas, and it still wouldn't have been a problem, because at the end of the day, we would have understood why, even though it says Mos Yumas there, which in general would be Skila, we understand why it's Chanek, Lamaisa, because of the Arusa Beskila. Maybe you have a problem for Maka Avimo, which again says Mos Yumas and doesn't say Demei Hambam. And then you would learn that Aviv Imo, you get Skila, but yet we know Lekaman later on that you get Chanek. Adigmir me'ovi yidoni ligmu me'eshes ish. Diata rashay lemoshcha l'hachmir alel l'hake alel. So Gemara says the problem would have been that now what would you have had? You would have had to learn from Ov and Yidoni. So what would you have here? If you had Mos Yumas by the case of Maka Aviv Imo, it says Mos Yumas. So now you'd be stuck. Because on one hand, you want to say that Mos Yumas teaches me what? Well, from Ov and Yidoni, it teaches me that you get Skila. Using what we learned before now, we said that we know elsewhere that Eishes Ish gets Chanek because of what? Because of the fact that Eishes Ish Arusha gets Skila, that implies that a regular Eishes Ish gets Chanek. But it says Mos Yumas by Eishes Ish regular Nisu as well. So now you have a problem, because now you have Mos Yumas by Ov and Yidoni, which means Skila, and you have Mos Yumas by Eishes Ish by Chanek, by Eishes Ish Nisua, which means Chanek. Which one would you do now for a regular case of Mos Yumas, like a Makalel, like a Maka Avivima? Which one would you do? Says in Gemara, you want to learn from Ov and Yidoni. The problem is, why don't you learn from Eishes Ish? So you would learn which one would you learn from? You would learn from the case that's lower. Which one is lower? The case of Chanek, which is the case of Eishes Ish. Says the Gemara, now we have another problem. So now we've solved those problems. We've solved the problems in general again. We wanted to say, the Gemara is saying here, we have a choice. We want to learn either from Mos Yumas or from Demei Hambam, from Ov and Yidoni to all the other cases, to teach me all the other cases that say Mos Yumas or Demei Hambam. There'll be Skila as well if it doesn't specify. The Gemara is suggesting that originally we thought to learn from Mos Yumas, but we couldn't do that, because then we'd have a contradiction in halachas that we know, Lemaisa, we know already halacha, L'Moshe V'Sina, maybe we'll see, but we know that the halachas by Eishes Ish Nesua and by Maka Aviv Imo is Chanek, and yet it says Mos Yumas there. And if you learn from Mos Yumas, then you would say, well, what do? Now I have halacha Moshe V'Sina. On the other hand, I know that there's a Gzeirat Shava. Says Gemara, that wouldn't have been a problem, because by Eishes Ish I would have said, it says Mos Yumas, yes, but we know that by Eishes Ish Arusa, it's Skila, so this Mos Yumas must be an exception, and it must be Chanek. And yes, it says Mos Yumas by Maka Ish Ve'aviv, but I would learn the Mos Yumas not from the case of Av and Yidoni. I would learn it from the case of Eishes Ish Nesua, which we know is Chanek, and that would be fine. The Gemara says, now I have a little bit of a problem, though, because now, at the end of the day, where do we know Mos Yumas in general? What does that mean? It says in Gemara, Malay Sha'ar Niskalin Gufayu Kakashele, De'ibe Mos Yumas Gmire, Ad Gmire Ben Ovi Yidoni Ligmu Me'eshes Ish. If, in fact, you're going to go ahead and learn Mos Yumas to tell me Skila, now we're stuck. Because now, on one end, again, the givens are that Mos Yumas is by Maka Ish V'Aviv, it's by Eishes Ish Nesua, and it's by Av and Yidoni. Ov and Yidoni. So now we're trying to figure out, what do we learn Mos Yumas from Ov and Yidoni for? So now we explained how it's possible to learn Mos Yumas being the basis of Skila, and yet Eishes Ish and Maka Aviv Imo could still be Chanek. Eishes Ish, again, because it specifically specifies that Arusa is Skila, and therefore regular Eishes Ish would be Chanek. And we can learn, Maka Ish V'Aviv, that we're going to take the lesser of the two, because now you can either learn from Ov and Yidoni Skila or from Eishes Ish Chanek. We're going to learn Chanek. Now the Gemara says, but if you do that, now you're stuck. Because now, what about every other case where it says Mos Yumas? Now basically what you've set up, if you learn like this, is that every other case where it says Mos Yumas, you have a choice. Either learn from Ov and Yidoni Skila, or learn from what? Eishes Ish, that it's Chanek. You're never going to have Skila. You're basically getting rid of your Gzeirat Shava, because then you're always going to have to learn from Eishes Ish, because you always have to take the lesser of the two. Therefore, says the Gemara at the end, that's why we don't learn from Mos Yumas. That's why we learn from Demei Hambam. Now we have no problems, because now from Ov and Yidoni, what are we learning? Ov and Yidoni we know is Skila. Now we're going to learn from the words the mayhem bam in Ova Nidoni that anywhere else in the Torah that it says the mayhem bam, that's going to be skila. Anywhere else where it says in the Torah mosu masu, I don't know. I don't know what that halacha is going to be. It depends. So Lamaisa, the Gemara says, anytime it says the mayhem bam, it's skila, just like Ova Nidoni. Anytime it says mos yumsu, either you're going to know from somewhere else what it is, or it will be the default, which will be what? Which will be chenek, which works out perfectly, because Eishes Ish says mos yumsu, and we know the halacha is chenek. Make aviv v'imo says mos yumsu, and we know that it's chenek, and it works out perfectly. So whenever it says mos yumas or mos yumsu without anything else, that's going to be the default misa, which is chenek. Anytime it says the mayhem bam, that's going to be skila, and that's why in the Mishnah, we're not going to go through every single one, but the Mishnah that we're about to list, some of them are going to actually say skila in the pasuk, uskaltem b'avanim v'mesu. I mean, I haven't looked at everyone, but I'm curious. I would assume that if you look at the other ones, the ones that don't say uskaltem b'avanim v'mesu, probably say demehem bam in there. Or the Rishonim would probably yes. But again, that's what you would expect to find. At this point of the Gemara, you would expect to find in any of the ones in the Mishnah that are coming up now, either it'll say uskaltem b'avanim v'mesu, or it will say demehem bam, and lemaisa you'll be able to learn from Ova and Yidoni that these would all be skila. Okay, it's glat. Much glatter the second time. Elu ein aniskalin. Zak the Mishnah. That's why you have to chazer. These are the people that get skila. Haba al ha'em, al eishes ha'av, if you have relations with your mother, or your father's wife, even if it's not your mother. V'al ha'kala, your daughter-in-law. V'al ha'zachor, a man to a man. V'al ha'behema, a man to a behema. V'isha mevias a behema, a woman with a behema. V'hamegadef, one who curses God. V'aoved avodas kochavim. If you give your zera lamolech, which is interesting, if you give your kid to molech, this implies that that's a different form, that that's not under the category of avodas kochavim. Notice in zara lamolech is not under the category because it's listed separately. Ubal ovi yidoni, this case of again speaking to the dead. V'hamachales hashabes, v'hamakalel aviv v'imo, v'haba al nara hamiurasa, as we just said, as opposed to a woman who's married, which will be chenek. V'hamesis, person who curses, who causes others to serve avodah-zarah, v'hamediach, not only a person who causes individual to serve avodah-zarah, but a person who causes the whole ear to serve avodah-zarah, like ir anidachas, v'hamachashef, a magician, uven sorer umoreh, the one who rebels against his parents. Now again, these are all cases of skila, if the person is properly warned with edim, etc. If they're not properly warned with edim, etc., what's the punishment for mazid? What's punishment for mazid if you're not properly warned? Kares. And what's the punishment if you do a b'shogeg? If something is bekares, what's the punishment for shogeg? Chatas. So you either pick your choice. You either get misas bezin. If you want misas bezin, make sure that there are witnesses who warn you. If you'd rather have kares, make sure that there are no witnesses. And if you're okay with the chatas, then just don't do it on purpose.
Kares is min hashamayim.
Kares is min hashamayim. You don't want to mess with that either, but Haba ala aim chayav ala mishum aim mishum eshasav. So the Gemara says, interestingly, if you come upon your mother, who's also your father's natural wife, it's your mother, again, because your mother might not be, you might have been born out of wedlock, but if it's your mother who's also your father's wife, then you're chayav two chatases. Again, if it's in terms of skila or kares, it doesn't really make a difference. There's no two skilas or two kareses. If we're talking about korban chatases, then you're going to be chayav two chatases, one because she's your mother, and one because she's your father's wife. Rabbi Yehuda mer eno chayav ela mishum ein bilvad, and we'll see this in the Gemara. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, you're only chayav for being your mother, not for being your father's wife. If you come on your father's wife who's not your mother, then you're going to be chayiv in that case. And Rabbi Yehuda seems to agree. You'll be chayiv two, Eishes Av and Eishes Ish, and we'll have to see why, because again, seemingly there's a miyut by the case of mother that would make it different, because otherwise you should get two. The default should be two. If there's two isurim involved with the same person, it should be two. So if you come upon your father's wife and he's married to her, then it's A, your father's wife, and B, a married woman. Bein b'chay avid, bein la'achar mitas avid, bein min erisin, bein min hanasuin. Whether your father's alive or dead, whether he's just engaged to her or married to her. We've shown him point out that this is not true across the board. That means this is only in terms of the isser of your father's wife. Your father's wife is usher to you once he's engaged to her forever. Whether they get married or not get married, whether they get divorced, whether she dies, once she's your father's wife, she's usher to you forever. The Eishes Ish aspect of your father's wife is not usher to you after he dies. Eishes Ish is not a problem after you die. But there are problems, certain people you can't marry even after the person dies. If you're with them, it's not alt Eishes Ish. But this is talking about a case where you're with your father's wife before he dies, while he's alive, you're chayiv two things, Eishes Ish and Eishes Av. If it's after your father dies, then you're only chayiv one chatas for Eishes Av. So the Gemara Baal Kalas, or the same thing with the daughter-in-law. If you're with the daughter-in-law when your son is still alive, you're over the Isser of daughter-in-law, and you're over the Isser of Eishes Ish. After your son passes away, Rahman al-Litzan, you're no longer over the Isser of Eishes Ish, you're only over the Isser of daughter-in-law. Habal Kalas chayiv la mishum Kalas mishum Eishes Ish, bein b'chayiv beno, bein la'achar mitas beno, bein min erisin, and bein min hanesuin. Tanya, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, im lo isa ima ria la'aviv eno chayiv la mishum ha'ein bilvad. There's a machlokes here, where there seems to be a contradicting brayso. Again, in the Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda said that when you're with your mother, who's also your father's wife, your natural mother, you're only chayav one. Over here, the brayso seems to be saying that according to Rabbi Yehuda, you're only chayav one if, in fact, your mother is a person that your father should not have married. If your father was a Kohen, and he married a Grusha, and you were born, and then you're with your mother, so your father should not have married her. He was usher to marry her in the first place. Therefore, you're only going to be chayiv the chatas for her being your mother, not for her being your father's wife, because they shouldn't have gotten married. But according to this way of learning Rabbi Yehuda, if in fact your parents were married totally 100% legitimately, and you're with your mother, according to this opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, you will in fact be two chatases. So again, that's why this brayso argues with our Mishnah. In our Mishnah, according to Rabbi Yehuda, if your parents are regularly married and you're with your mother, you're only chayiv one chatas for your mother. According to the brayso, you're only chayiv one chatas only in a case where your father should not have married your mother. But if your father and mother got married regularly, 100% ka'alacha, and then you're with your mother, then in Achanami, Rabbi Yehuda would agree that you get both. So let's work within this opinion for a second, which we're then going to, on the second half, reject and say, no, that's not the way that Rabbi Yehuda holds. Rabbi Yehuda holds that even if your mother and father were married regularly, l'maisa you're only chayiv one, which we'll see why. But let's work within this opinion for a second of Rabbi Yehuda, who argues with the Rabbanan seemingly. And Rabbanan would say that even if it was an illegitimate marriage, if they got married and the kedushin was tofes and the kedushin was chal, then l'maisa you will be chayav for two things. So let's work within this opinion, where your parents got married not 100% ka'alacha, and now you're with your mother, so you're only going to get mishum ein bilvad. You only have to bring one chatas. My ein ariolo. What's an example of a case where they shouldn't have been married? It can't be that it was somebody that your father was usher to als kares or als misas beis-din, because what would that example be? If that's true, miklal de rabbanan savri afagav de ein ariolo. That implies that the rabbanan would hold that the kedushin is chal, and that when you're with your mother who married your father through a chayav krisus, where the two of them are chayav kares for marrying each other, the kedushin would be chal. The rabbanan say you'll still be chayav two chatases for being with that woman. That's impossible. How less like kedushin begavad? It's impossible to say that kedushin will be chal if they were usher to each other als kares. Rather, ela chayav lavin. That's the machlokes. Rabbanan and Rabbi Yehuda are arguing where the father and the mother got married, not where they were usher to each other als kares or als misas beis-din. For sure, that's not chal. Everybody agrees, even Rabbanan, that if you're with the mother like that, then l'maisa you're only chayav one chatas because we don't recognize their marriage. We recognize the fact that she's your mother, and therefore you have to bring a chatas. Where they're arguing in a case where they got married, where the isser for them to get married was just an isser lav. It was just a don't do. It wasn't chayiv kares, it wasn't chayiv misas beis-din, it was a don't do. The question is, when it's an isser lav for two people to marry each other, is that kedushin chal or not? So what's an example? The Gemara is going to give on the next daf, marrying somebody's maternal grandmother. It's like a sheni le'arayos. That's not a kares. That's not an isser skila, sreifa harag v'chanek. That's an isser lav. So if one marries somebody who's an isser lav to them, is that kedushin chal or not? Well, according to the Rabbanan, the kedushin is chal. And therefore, when you're with that mother of yours, who happens to be usher to your father, but married to your father because kedushin was chal, you're going to be chayiv two chatases. A, as your mother, who's clearly your mother biblically, and B, as your father's wife with an isser lav, which was chal. According to Rabbi Yehuda, no. When your father marries a woman who it's usher for him to marry mitzad just a lav, the kedushin is not chal. Therefore, when you're with her, you're only going to be chayav one chatas, i.e., for her being your mother. Zak the Gemara, Rabbi Yehuda Sarvalak Rabbi Akiva Damar, ein kedushin tovsin b'chayav lavin, and therefore it's not tofes, and therefore you're only chayav one chatas. Now we're going to ask a kasha, because if we're not confused enough, now we're going to confuse us more. Maser Rav Oshia. Rav Oshia says, Isser mitzvah v'isser kedusha. There are two isurei lav where choltzos v'lo misyabos, where you have to do chalitza and not yibam. Now let's just say this outside for a second before we get into the Gemara and we don't get confused. If I'm telling you that I have that I'm a yavam, Rachman litzlan, and a yavama comes before me, so there's two options here. Well, three options. Either I could do yibam if I'm allowed to marry her. Let's say I'm not allowed to marry her. Well, the question becomes, if I'm not allowed to marry her, then there's two options. Either if I'm not allowed to marry her, then I don't have to do anything, or I have to do chalitza. Seemingly, at first glance, if I asked you, seemingly the only time you could do chalitza or have to do chalitza is if you were able to marry her otherwise. If you were able to marry her, then you could either do yibum. If you choose not to do yibum, you do chalitza. If she's usher to you, then you don't even have to bother doing chalitza. That means it's possible that your brother married her legally. Your brother married a woman. Your brother, as we'll see in a second, and your brother, you guys are Kohanim, you're brothers. Your brother married a woman. The brother dies. You become the Kohen Gadol. Kohen Gadol can marry an almana. So she's usher to you. So now it's not a question of do you do chalitza or don't do chalitza. If she's usher to you, then what? You don't have to do anything. So the fact that the Gemara says Isser mitzvah Isser kedusha choltzos v'lo misyabos, you do chalitza in certain cases. What does that imply? That maybe it's usher to marry them, but if you did, the kedushin would be chal. So in cases where if you marry them, the kedushin would be chal, even though it's usher, that would be a chiyuv of chalitza. In a case where if you marry them, the kedushin would not be chal, then you would not have to even do chalitza. So what's an example based on what we just said? If somebody is coming before you and it's an isser kares, if whatever, your brother marries, whatever, I'm just making an example, a paternal sister, whatever it is, married a sister or something, a half-brother marries a half, whatever it is, and now the sister comes before you and it's an isser kares, so it would not be choltzos v'lo misyabos, it would be nothing. If it was a case where, again, it's a sheni larayos, where it's usher to marry her, but if you married her, it would be chal, then you'd have to do chalitza. So let's figure out. So the Gemara here says, Isser mitzvah, and we'll have to see why it's a question on Rabbi Yehuda. We're asking a question on Rabbi Yehuda. Isser mitzvah ve'isser kedusha, choltzos v'lo misyabos. There's these two categories of Isser mitzvah ve'isser kedusha, which are lavin. The person presented before you, the yavam, is usher to you also lav, which we'll see what that is in a second. And since it's only a lav to marry them, but seemingly the kedushin will be chal, lemaise what? You're going to go ahead and have to do chalitza. And again, just jumping ahead half a daf, that's going to be the kasha on Rabbi Yehuda. Because if we're saying over here, and if Rabbi Yehuda doesn't argue on this, and he agrees that Isser mitzvah, Isser kedusha, chotzos, v'lo misyabos, what does that imply? That implies that he holds you have to do chalitza by an Isser lav. Why would you have to do why would you have to do chalitza by an Isser lav? Because seemingly the marriage by an Isser lav is chal. He just finished telling us what? That the marriage by an Isser lav is not chal, and that's why if you're with your mother, when your father married her al Isser lav, you only have to bring one korban. Okay, that's basically Nun Gimel Amud Beis. So, Nun Gimel Amud Beis. Isser mitzvah, shnios midivrei sofrim. What's the example of Isser mitzvah? Isser mitzvah is a sheni larayos. Why is it called an Isser mitzvah? That means that a lady is presented in front of you to be your yavama, and she's usher to you al sheni larayos in the Torah. It's not in the Torah, it's rabbinically she's usher to you sheni larayos. There are things that are in the Torah biblically, and then there are rabbinic things. So she's not usher to you in the Torah al kares, al misas beizin. She's usher to you al Isser lav. So what do? It's an Isser mitzvah. V'amai karelo Isser mitzvah. Why is it called Isser mitzvah? Shem mitzvah l'shma divrei chachamim. Since chachamim are the one who said that this woman is usher to you, and it's a mitzvah to listen to them, we call this woman who's presented in front of you to marry, who's an Isser lav to marry, we call her an Isser mitzvah, and according to that case, since the kedushin would be chal, even though you're not allowed to marry her, you have to do chalitza. What's an example of an Isser kedusha? That's the case with a kohen. Amana le-kohen gadol. Again, your brother was married to a woman, he died, now you become kohen gadol. If you were a regular kohen, you can marry her. But if you're a kohen gadol now, you can't marry even an amana. Therefore, she's presented in front of you, she's not asur midoraisa, but she's asur midirabanan to marry you. She's an isur kedusha. Grusha v'chalutza le-kohen edud. If it ended up that, again, this woman married your brother, let's say she was divorced, and then she married your brother illegally, and the kedushin was chal, because it's an isur lav, and then your brother dies. Now it's an Isser Lav for you to marry her because she's a Gerusha, she's a Chalutza from before your brother. But what do? So it's an Isser Lav. You can't marry her, but you need to do Chalitza. Why is it called, these cases of Kohen, why are they called Kedoshim? V'amai korelu Isser Kedusha. Dichsiv Kedoshim yu leilohayam. Says the Gemara, V'tanya Allah, Rabbi Yehuda Machlif. Rabbi Yehuda switches them around. Now again, this is just logistic. Rabbi Yehuda says that what? As Rashi explains, the Isser Mitzvah applies to Kohanim, and the Yisr Kedusha is talking about Shnios Arayos. It means that he agrees with the halacha. He agrees that when these people are presented before you, it's Choltzos v'lo misyabos. He's just saying that, no, Rabbanan, what you're calling Isser Mitzvah, you should be calling Isser Kedusha. And what you're calling Isser Kedusha, you should be calling Isser Mitzvah. Why would Kohanim be called Isser Mitzvah? So as Rashi explains, because at the very end of the parsha of Kohanim, it says Eila HaMitzvos. And at the very end, why would the Arayos be called Isser Kedusha? Because at the end of the day, the rabbis are making something up, and when the rabbis not making up, when the rabbis say something, it's Kadesh Atzmacha B'motelecha. They're saying Kadesh, you should make yourself holy. Kiddush you should make yourself holy. Things that are really mutter to you midoraisa, you should make yourself holy. Again, for our purposes, Yehuda is not arguing on who's going to do and who's going to be. It's just, what are you calling this lady, this almana who comes before a Kohen Gadol? Are you calling her an Isser Kedusha, which is what the Rabbanan say? Rabbi Yehuda says you call her an Isser Mitzvah. Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbanan are friends. They agree that for both of them agree you need to do Chalitza here and not Ibam. But they just want to know what you call her. But the Gemara's point is that Rabbi Yehuda is only arguing on what you call her. He's not arguing that you do Chalitza with her. If you do Chalitza with her, what do you mean, Rabbi Yehuda, you do Chalitza with her? That implies what? That implies that you hold that it's an Isser Lav to marry her. That implies you need to do Chalitza because the Isser Lav would be Chal. But that's not what you just said. You just said that if you're with your mother who's married to your father with an Isser Lav, you only need to bring what? You only need to bring one korban because the kedushin wasn't tofes. It wasn't chal. What are you talking about? You just said here that the kedushin is tofes when there's an isser lav. That's why you have to do chalitza. That's what the Gemara says. Chalufehu demachlif. He just defines isser mitzvah and isser kedusha different. Ha chalitza baya. Ve'isa kadayit Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Akiva svirale michte chayave lavin Rabbi Akiva chayave krisus dami. We know that chayave lavin are like chayave krisus, like we said, and the kedushin is not chal, and that's why you only bring one chatas when you're with your mother, who's your father's wife. Be'isser lav. It says the Gemara. I understand. V'chayave krisus lav b'nei chalitza v'yibam ninhu. So if in fact he holds that krisus is not chal and misas bezin is not chal, then a person who marries with a lav is not chal. So why are you doing chalitza here? It must be that when a person marries a woman that he's not allowed to marry b'isur lav, it is chal, and that's why at the end of the day you have to do chalitza in this case with a woman who's presented before you who is an isur chal to marry, who's an isur lav to marry. But then why, when your father marries a woman with an isur lav, why in fact when you're with that woman who's your mother are you only chayav one chatas? Says the Gemara, you're right. L'dvar of the Tanakama ka'amar v'lei lo svira lei. No, you're right. Rabbi Yehuda holds like we thought. Rabbi Yehuda holds that even by an isur lav it's not chal. Rabbi Yehuda's only coming into this whole discussion and telling the Rabbanan, I disagree with you on two fronts. I'm not even going to talk about the fact that choletzes v'lo misyavemes. I disagree with that. I hold Isser Mitzvah ve'Isser Kedusha is Eino choletzes ve'ena misyavemes, because at the end of the day, what? At the end of the day, the Kedusha would not be chal. Therefore, it's like a chayave krisus and a chayave misas bezin, where you don't have to do yibam and you don't have to do chalitza. I'm just saying, not only do I argue about that big point, you happen to be wrong about your definition of the words Isser Mitzvah and Isser Kedusha as well. That's what the Gemara is saying. So it's not, we were being medayik, the fact that he argues on the definition means that he agrees with the main halacha. And the Gemara is saying, no, he argues with the definition and he argues on the main halacha. And the main halacha, well, is that according to him, since the Isser Lav would not be chal, therefore at the end of the day, it's no different than chayave krisus and chayave misas bezdin. And in fact, this person would not have to do chalitza, he would not have to do yibum, he couldn't do yibum, he would not have to do anything. Kiyasa Rabbi Yitzchak Tani Kididnan. When Rabbi Yitzchak came, he said, Rabbi Yehuda Omer Eino Chayav El Mishuma Ein Bilvad. He went like our Mishnah. Now again, we just talked about our brisa. Throw out the brisa. Rabbi Yehuda is not making any differences between who's mutter, if the father was able to marry the mother, the father wasn't able. Forget about all that. Rabbi Yehuda says across the board, when a person is with his mother, even if it's his natural mother and it's his father's wife currently, he's still only chayav one chatas. And the Gemara says, what's going on? V'tay mamai. What's the reason? Rabbanan make a lot of sense. It's two isurim. Yes, it's one person, but it's two isurim. You're with your mother. She is also your father's wife. You should have to bring two chatases. Says the Gemara, we're going to give three answers. Abaye, reject. Ravacha Bereida Ravika, reject. Then Rava, which we'll end with. Zak the Gemara Amar Abaye, the Amar Kra Imchahi. You have to see. I think the article actually brings the psukim on the bottom, but you have the psukim over here as well. There's a pasuk that says, Ervas avicha ve'ervas imcha lo segale, imchahi lo segale ervasa. You can't uncover the nakedness of your father, which pashta means you can't be with your father. Can't have relations with your mother. She's your mother. Don't reveal her nakedness. Then there's a separate passage that doesn't talk about the nakedness of your mother. Ervas eshes avicha lo segale, ervas avichahi. The nakedness of your father's wife. And again, you need that because it could be that one case is your mother and not your father's wife, and one could be your father's wife and not your mother. Says the Gemara, why does the pasuk say by the case of your mother when it says ervas avicha ve'ervas imcha lo sigale ervas lo sigale imchahi? What is the word imchahi? What if you tell me it's your mother? Just said, don't reveal your mother's nakedness. What do you mean it's your mother? Says the Gemara, imchahi mishum imo ata mechayiv aviyata mechayiv mishum eshasav. He says it's a miyut. That when it says you shouldn't reveal the mother's nakedness, and then says imchahi, she's your mother, it's telling you that even if she's your mother and she's your father's wife, imchahi, you're only going to be chayav for her being your mother. Says the Gemara, Elameata, the problem is that if imchahi excludes something, then the pasuk by ervash eshes avicha lo sigalei ervas avichahi, the pasuk by a woman who's your father's wife and not your mother, it says ervash eshes avicha lo sigalei, and then it says avichahi, it's the erva of avicha. If imchahi excludes something, then avichahi needs to exclude something as well. Mishum eshes avata mechayvo v'iata mechayvo mishum imo. Now you have a little bit of a problem. Now you have a pasuk that says your mother you're going to be chayav for being with imchahi, but if she happens to be your father's wife as well, you're not going to be chayav al the fact that she's your father's wife. Now you have a pasuk that says your father's wife you're going to be chayav for avichahi, but if she happens to be your mother as well, you're not going to be chayav al your mother. So what comes out? It comes out that if she's your father's wife and not your mother, you're chayav achatas. If she's your mother and not your father's wife, you're chayav achatas. If she's your father's wife and your mother, well, now you're a talmud chacham all of a sudden. Now you say, well, wait. Based on this pasuk, imchahi, I'm only chayav al the fact that she's my mother. I'm not chayav the fact that she's my father's wife. And I'm a talmud chacham, so go to the next pasuk, and it says she's my father's wife, and it excludes avichahi, excludes the fact that I'm not chayav that she's my mother. I'm basically off the hook. This pasuk excludes me from the fact that she's my mother. This pasuk excludes me from the fact that she's my father's wife. It ends up that if she's only one of them, you have to bring a chatas. And if it happens to be your mother and your father's wife, your real mother, you're not going to be chayiv at all. Of course, that's not possible. Says the Gemara, if you learn like that, because if you learn imcha, you have to learn avicha. Says the Gemara, Ela imo sheyeshet aviv kai hacha u'mimayit la, kai hacha u'mimayit la. Each one is going to be, imcha he is going to be mimayit, and avicha who is going to be mimayit. Hashta imo she'eno eshet aviv mechayiv. Eshet aviv she'eno imo mechayiv. Imo shehi eshet aviv lo mechayiv klal. Ridiculous. Visu, and if you say that, lirabbanan nami haksiv imchahi. And if you learn like that also, then how are the rabbanan going to learn? The pasuk says, lamaisa imchahi. So what are the rabbanan going to do with that? They hold that if it's your mother and your father's wife, you're going to be chayiv too. But imchahi seems to be excluding that. Ella hahumi bayalech Rav Shisha brei Ravidi, Rabbi Yehuda nami hahumi bayalech Rav Shisha brei Ravidi. Says the Gemara, no, as we'll see on the next daf, imchahi is going to be learned for something else. If you don't learn imchahi to make a miyat, then you don't have to learn avichahi to make a miyat, and you have no problems. Well, you do have one problem. You have no source for the fact that you only chayav one chatas. But we're not learning anything from imchahi. We're going to learn something else from imchahi. So now we're still stuck. Where does Rabbi Yehuda know that if it's your mother and your father's wife, your natural mother, you're chayiv only one chatas? El amaracha brei Rav Ika amar kra. It says in the pasuk ervasa. Ervas avicha ve'ervas imcha lo sigale imchahi. We learned imchahi for something else. Lo sigale ervasa. Don't reveal her nakedness in the singular. What does that mean? Amar kra ervasa mishum erva achas ata mechayiv v'yita mechayiv mishtum shtei ervas. You're only going to be chayiv for ervasa, one erva. What's erva? The fact that she's your mother, not the fact that she's your father's wife. Elameata, now you have a problem. Because at the end of the day, the pasuk by kalascha, by a daughter-in-law, also says the word ervasa. Elameata ervas kalascha lo sigale eshes binchahi lo sigale ervasa hachanami mishum erva achas ata mechayiv v'yita mechayiv mishum shtei aros. In there, by the kala, by the daughter-in-law, it also says ervasa. Therefore, what should it be? It should only be for one. But what do we know? That everybody across the board, even Rabbi Yehuda, holds that by a daughter-in-law, you're going to be chayav for two. So very nice. You want to learn that ervasa says only one, mother and not father's wife. But then ervasa you'd have to learn is daughter-in-law and not son's wife. V'hatnan, but we know haba kalaso chayav ala mishum kalaso mishum eshes ish bein b'chayav no bein me'alcha v'mitzdo v'relo pligi Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda doesn't argue on that. Elakevan dechad gufahu afagav detrei isura ninu ksiv ervasa. Rather, what's ervasa coming? It's not teaching me only chayav for one. Ervasa is teaching me that even though she's only one body, you could be chayav two isurim, alt your mother and alt your father's wife. Hachanami kevan dechad gufahu afagav detrei isura ninu ksiv ervasa. So too over here, just like by kalascha, the daughter-in-law is one body. She's going to be chayav for daughter-in-law and for your son's wife. So too over here, it's your mother. You're going to be chayav for mother and for your father's wife. So again, very nice. We've dealt with imchahi. We've dealt with lo tigaler vasa. But now we're still stuck with how does Rabbi Yehuda know that in the case where she's your mother and your father's wife, you're only going to be chayav one chatas. It gets a little bit confusing with Rava, so I'd rather just save that for tomorrow. Shkayach.